Hi, Alex here from Rebeloper.com. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to this tutorial where I will show you how you can create Apple sign-in with a SwiftUI project. So if you are interested in building out this app, make sure to hit that subscribe button, open up Xcode and dive into it. So let's take a look at our starter project, because indeed I have created a starter project for you so we can save on time. And go ahead and click the link down below. You will see where to find this starter project and the resources that are following it. So first things first, let's just build and run this on our device. And just a reminder, with Apple Sign-In, you need to have a real device so you can test it out, and I'm just showing you this on my QuickTime player. Here you go. Hello world. That is our basic setup here. And let's just go ahead and import some resources that you will find, of course, in the link. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do here. So sign in with Apple SwiftUI helpers is the folder name, and we have some files here. You can go ahead and take a look at them, but we are going to work mostly in only one of them, and we will get to them once we progress with the tutorial. So for now, let's just drag and drop them here and move forward. So what do we need here? Well, first of all, we need an environment object for this sign in with Apple Manager. And if you just take a look at the files, here we have sign in with Apple Manager. Now, why do we need this? Because here we have a published variable and it is called isUserAuthenticated, and this is what we are going to check for our views selection. And as you can see, we already have some views here: launch screen view, login view, main tab view, and this main tab view has a newsfeed view and our profile view. So we are going to use this isUserAuthenticated variable so we can present either or the other. So let's go into our scene delegate and create our environment object. And under var window, let's just create let, and this will be a sign in with Apple Manager. And let's initialize it, sign in with Apple Manager. Okay, now all we have to do is add this as an environment object on the content view. So let's just do that. Dot environment object. And this also is an observable object. If you take a look at the Swift file that I have shown you earlier, you will see that sign in with Apple Manager is indeed an observable object. Okay, now that we added our environment object to the content view, it's time to access it as an environment object inside our content view. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, take a look at the video about states and environments and binding objects that I have created on the YouTube channel. So at environment object, var, and again, sign in with Apple Manager. Okay, and this will be of type, of course, sign in with Apple Manager. So now we get to hold our sign in with Apple Manager and grab our isUserAuthenticated, if I'm correct. Let me just double check. Yeah, it is isUserAuthenticated. Now, we want to present, instead of this text hello world, we want to present either the launch screen, the login, or the main tab view. Now, we want to basically check if the user is signed in. So this is pretty straightforward. We are just going to have this in an if-else statement. So if sign in with Apple Manager is, let's just have that. I believe we need to have a command B, so we get this auto completion as usual. Okay, and oh, it's with not a capital S, a small s, and now we should have isUserAuthenticated, correct. So and then we just check. Let me just move this away so we can see a lot more code. So if isUserAuthenticated and I have a file that is called auth state, and we have three states: undefined, signed out, or signed in. Now let's just check for the undefined first. So if the authentication state, user authentication state is undefined, then we want to show the launch screen. And if you go to your sign in with Apple Manager, you will see that the default value is undefined. And of course, it's logical. That is how it should be. So now we are returning our launch screen. So let's type in return here, launch screen in view. Okay, and let's just go ahead and add the other one of signed in, or rather let's just take care of signed out first. So signed out, there we go. If the user is signed out, of course we want to show them our login view. Else, and again I would just copy and paste this, if the user authentication is signed in, then we want to present the tab view. Okay, and if we build and run, hit Command R, you will basically, oh, it's not tab view, it's main tab view. Let me just quickly fix that. Okay, now this is kind of how it should work, but it says function declares an opaque recurrent type, and this basically means that we are expecting a view to be returned. But hey, it's there. We are returning our main tab view or our login view, but we are doing it in an if-else statement. So what we need to do is basically wrap all of this into, let's say, a Z stack. So that Z stack is returned. And then we can omit all of these returns. There we go. Let's just delete them. And what luck, you now know that this is how it is constructed. So Z stack, there we go. This could be also a V stack or a H stack. It doesn't really matter because we are not using any of the Z stack's special properties. Okay, and as you can see, now all of this compiles. If we hit Command R and switch back to our phone, let's just open that up, we'll see that it says loading. It is loading because under the launch screen, we have a simple text of saying loading. Now, how awesome is that? Now we already know that our user state is undefined, and we are showing the launch screen appropriately. Okay, so next up we want to check our user authentication state when this launch screen view appears. So let's just do that, and this is pretty straightforward. I have already added some code here, but basically when this VStack appears, we want to check our user auth, and that is here. Now, if you recall and you are digging into my files, you will see that we indeed have a check user auth with a completion function under sign in with Apple Manager. So you guessed it, we are going to just copy and paste again from our content view this environment object. There we go. It is pretty straightforward. I'm just omitting wasting time here. So we have our sign in with Apple Manager, and now under on appear we need to call self because we are in a closure, and now we can grab our sign in with Apple Manager and check user auth. There we go. Let's just hit with hide this folder structure with command 0. And I will do this later down the line too when we need to. So completion, we are going to get back an auth state. So let's take a look at our auth state here. So I will create a switch for the auth state and just let this auto completion fix take care of the rest. So switch must be exhaustive. Let's fix that, and we have all of our cases here. And I can safely omit this unknown default because I do know that I already only have undefined signed out and signed in. And what I will do is first of all just print out what we see here. So auth state is dot undefined Okay, and let's just do all of these for our signed out and our signed in. Now basically we don't have to do anything here if the user is signed out or it is signed in, but we will do perform existing account setup flows, which is, I know, a mouthful again, but what this basically will do is check if we do have a user signed in or if we do have a user signed out. So we do just call this self.perform existing account setup flows, and this is just a private function that I have already added here that we will use here. So what we need to do basically here is perform an authorization request upon an authorization controller. Now I know this is kind of confusing, but let me just type out the code and you will see how that looks like. First of all, let's take care of our perform sign-in, because after that we just need to add our requests, and that will be pretty simple. So first up, let's create our controller. And that is an AS authorization controller, and I have already imported authentication services. That is what AS is for. And let's just see. We have one initialization with authorization requests, and we will just add our requests here. I will just guide you through how, what, and which one of these requests we need in our case. Okay, now we need to set the delegate and our presentation context provider to ourself. So controller dot delegate. And if you are coming along from UI Kitland, then you would add something here called self, but basically this self is a view and it is not a view controller. So what we are going to do is going to create basically delegates. And we are going to use the files that I have provided. But for now, let me just go up here and create our delegates. And that is at state, and it will be a private because all states should be private, var and Apple, or rather yet sign in with Apple delegates. There we go. And yeah, it will be of type sign in with Apple delegates. And we must know that this exists, but we will set its value to nil. So it's kind of cumbersome, but go ahead and take a look at the code that you have just added from the resources. So the delegate will be sign in with Apple delegates with a small s here. And now let's add our controllers. Presentation context provider, and that is the same. Sign in with Apple delegates. And now we just perform controller, perform request. So as you can see, for the sign in with Apple delegates, when we provide them as a controller's delegate, we have some issues. So let's fix that right now. Basically, we have nil here, and what we want to do is create them. So let's just create our sign in with Apple delegates, and that is sign in with Apple delegates. And we are going to initialize it with a window and with a completion handler. And this window, well, we need to create this window. And again, we have some helper files, this environment window key, but all we have to do here is create our window. And this is pretty strange to type out. So I'm just going to check here. And that is an environment with a window, var window, UI window. It is pretty strange, but bear with me. Let me just add it here at environment and /dot window. There we go. And it will be a var window UI window. Okay, so basically we are grabbing the window of our project, yes. So we can add our window here. And we can take care of our result. Now, our result returns a string, or in a case of failure, an error. So result. And let's take a look at our switch statement here. Switch result. There we go. And yeah, it is basically a success or a failure. So when we get this completion on signed in, we are basically knowing if the user is signed in or we did get an error. And we get back as a string a user ID. So let's create user ID here. And let's create our error. So if we do have an error, we basically want to present an alert that says, okay, something went wrong. And after the user clicks on OK, we want to sign out the user. So for that, I have set up our logic here. So we do have our alert here, and we have an error description for that alert. And we do have a state for is alert presented. So that is how we present our alert. So first things first, we want to set our errors description. So self.error description equals error and localized description. So that is what we are going to use. And then we are just going to present it by setting is alert presented to true. Okay. And yeah, once that is presented, what do we want to do? Well, we want to set the user authenticated to sign out. And that is inside, if you recall correctly, in the sign in with Apple Manager. So self.sign in with Apple Manager, and I see that we have a typo here. So let's just fix this real quick before we move forward. So here we have Apple delegates and capital A and a capital A. So we left off by setting our is user authenticated to be signed out. And again, this is a property, so it will change the view that is presented, and it will change the login view, change to the login view. Now, if we do have a user ID, then we want to set again self sign in with Apple Manager is user authenticated to signed in. Okay, now we have this user ID and maybe we want to use it later down the line. So what I have created here is basically user defaults. So let's just save this to the user defaults so we can use it later down the line. So user defaults dot standard and set, I will use any here, and user ID for key, and the key I have set a general key, and that is in the sign in with Apple Manager and user identifier key. So it is the user identifier. We will use this later down the line. And let's add in here self because we are inside a completion. Okay, so that is what we are going to do when we do get back some action from the sign in with Apple delegates. Now, what are these sign in with Apple delegates? Before we test this out, let me just go through and explain how all of this really works. Okay, so let's go into the sign with Apple delegates. And basically, we have this authorization controller delegate that has authorization controller did complete with authorization and did complete with error. Now, if there is an error, we complete with the sign-in succeeded with the failure of our error. If not, then we do have an authorization. Now, the authorization could be of two types. Either it is an Apple ID credential. That means that we are creating this authorization for the first time. And if we have an Apple credential email or an Apple credential full name and an Apple credential full name, then we register our new account. Otherwise, we just sign in with an existing account. Now, this is for your servers. So you can basically save the user, create the user, and retrieve the user. And these are just preliminary functions. You have to do the work for your own servers. Currently, I'm just always succeeding with a success of a credential of a user. Now, this credential.user is a string, so that is what I'm completing with, and that is what we are getting on the other file. Now, if the user has already signed in with iCloud Keychain, then we get back this AS password credential, and then we just need to sign in with the user and password to our database. So this is where you have to do your stuff connected to the database, and basically that is it. You don't have to work anything else, just these few functions. Okay, so let's go back and finish off our perform existing account setup flows. Now we need a request here. So let's just create our request. So let requests, and that will be an array of requests. So we need two requests here, and the first one is for the Apple ID request, and we are going to use a provider, and the second one is the password one. So AS authorization Apple ID provider, there we go. Initialize that and create our request, and the second one is AS and password provider, there we go, and create our request too. And what we want to do is perform our sign in with these. So perform sign in with these requests using requests. Okay, now because we don't want to make this request on a simulator, we can add in here if it is not the target environment of our simulator. Okay, and I believe we need a hashtag here. Then we can move forward, and here is our end if. Okay, so this will be only executed. It is simulator. So this will be executed only if we are not on the simulator. So let's just build and run and see how all of this looks on our phone. Okay, there we go. It is loading, and it says the operation couldn't be completed. And that means basically that we are signed out. So let's hit OK. Now let me just go through the code before I hit OK. So now we don't have a user ID saved in the NS user defaults. So we are bumping into, let's just go here and here. So we are bumping into here under user identifier does not exist, and we should see this in the logs here too. User identifier does not exist. Basically that means that we don't have a user identifier saved in the user defaults, and we are setting the state to undefined, but basically that is just going to the loan screen. So let's click OK here, and we are under the hello world, which is, let me just go there, which is currently our login view. So we want to log in. That is why we were taken here. Okay, so if I build and run again, we should see kind of the same thing. Yeah, it says loading and then hello world. And that is basically it for the launch screen. Now for the login screen, it will be a little bit easier because we are going to use a lot of copy and pasting, but let's just jump right into it. So let's just take care of what we can copy and paste first, and then we move on to the specific of our login view. So let's go to our launch screen view. And what we do need here is this perform sign in private function. So let's just copy that out. Go back to our login view and paste that in there instead of our empty function. And basically we can do so for our show Apple login too. Let's see, we have our request and we can perform with this request, but I'm just going to build that out right now. So let's go back. So here we just need an Apple ID request. So let request equals as Apple ID provider, and let's create our request. And now let me just take you there so you can see a little bit more. So a request. And now we want to have our request scope, and that those will be full name and email. Okay, we are going to use all of these, but make sure that you do need the full name and the email. So otherwise, just don't request it. So now we just want to perform our sign in using our request. Okay, so that will be our show Apple login. Yeah, this needs to be an array. Okay, and this show Apple login will be shown upon a tap of a button. But before we do that, let's sign in with Applet. Let's take care of our sign in with Apple delegates. There we go. I'm just going to copy and paste because there's quite a lot of code. There we go. And go to our login view. Correct. Okay. Now we want to present our sign in with Apple button, and that couldn't be easier. We just want to delete all of these. So let's add our sign in with Apple button, and of course we can leave it as is because we already have it here, but let's just add a few more stuff here, like a frame, a padding. So the frame, and I'm just going to take a look at my other project here, should be the minimum frame width should be 280 and the height should be at least 60. We are just going to delete the alignment. So let's add our on tap gesture recognizer, and we can add our code here. And finally, let's add an alert, and I will just copy and paste the alert again from here. Let's just do that real quick. So what we want to do, let me just clean this up first. Frame, padding, on tap gesture. And here we have our code. Now we want to call self and show Apple login. How awesome is that? So let's just build and run and see how this looks on our device here. Okay, first of all, we don't have a user defaults user. So let's click on OK. We will be taken to the sign in with Apple, and let's just sign in. Operation couldn't be completed. And what seems to be the error here? So let's build and run this. Okay. Let's see here. Let me just show you my screen. Okay. And if we tap on sign in with Apple, basically we will have another error. And that is because we haven't enabled sign in with Apple, which should have been one of the first steps. So let's go to our project, select our targets, and select sign in and capabilities, and click on this plus button and search for Apple sign in with Apple. There we go. And we just need to add it. Let's wait for the signing certificate to be repaired. And then after everything is okay, we should be able to see that controller pop up. So let's see, let's build and run. Let's just delete this because maybe we need to delete the app, and hit Command R. Okay. Let's see, sign in with Apple. There we go. And yeah, let's just hide our email here. Let's hit continue. There we go. And we are in. Welcome, user identifier. Of course, we don't have our user identifier placed in here yet. We will just fix this in just a moment. And if we go to the news feed, hello world, welcome user identifier. Now, if we go back to Xcode and relaunch this, then let's see what we will have here. We will be presented with our tab bar, and that is a good thing because we don't want to authorize again and again and again, but we want to have this user identifier populated. So let's go into our profile view, and what we want to do is again grab a hold of our sign in with Apple manager. And remember that we have saved that ID. We can, rather yet, we don't really need that. We could, but we don't really need that in here. We are going to grab it from the user defaults dot standard and string for key. Yeah, we do need that. Sorry about that. I really knew that we needed it from something. So sign in with Apple manager dot and user identifier key, and maybe we will need a self here. Let's see if we do. Yeah, we need to bang it because we really know that this really exists. So if we build and run now, we should see that we do have our ID here. Okay, and that is our user identifier. Okay, awesome stuff. Now we are really at the end of our tutorial, so let's just have a quick recap here because there has been a lot. And let's see, here we have our sign in with Apple button that we are using, environment window key for the window for the delegates to take effect in the launch screen view and in the login view, our auth state, undefined signed out, signed in, our Apple manager that keeps track of our is user authenticated and checks for our user auth, and our sign in with Apple delegates, which basically is, let me just show you here, basically what this is the AS authorization controller delegate brought to SwiftUI. Okay, and we are presenting the launch screen or the login view or the main view inside or the main tab view according to the auth state, and this auth state is checked under the content view. Here we go on this Z stack. Okay, we are having our profile view finally, and we are showing our user identifier on a text. Now that was pretty simple, wasn't it? In the next video I will go through all of this in UIKit, and I promise it will be a little bit easier. But hey, now you can know how you can use Apple sign-in with SwiftUI. Before we go, there is one final thing that I want to show you, and that is how you can reset all of this. And this is pretty straightforward. Let's go to our sim delegate, and we want to set the user defaults of our user ID. So even before we do anything here, let's just go and
Let me just type in user defaults dot standard dot set value, and we are going to set this empty string for the key, and we are using the sign in with Apple manager dot user identifier key. Okay, so once this, let me just switch to my phone here. As you can see, we are logged in, but if we build and run again, we will see that we will be prompted again to log in. So let's just hit, as you can see, now we are in the loading, the launch screen. Let's hit continue. There we go, and we are in. Okay, so how awesome is that?
Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit that notification bell, because in my next video I will do the same thing all over again, but in this time we are going to do it in UIKit. So not SwiftUI, but in UIKit. So make sure to check out that video, and while you wait for that, make sure you also check out these two videos that I have over here. I talk a lot about SwiftUI and iOS app development. So as usual, I will see you in the next one.